Hello, Tungsten Miner here. Last time we left off with the induction smelter, so now let's move on to this next machine. Next up we have the Phytogenic Insulator. This is a machine that basically automatically grows plants by introducing fertilizer and power in order to get them to grow faster. So in order for this to work, you need some kind of phytogrow. The basic recipe is to take some sawdust, niter, and slag, or charcoal, niter, and slag, either way, and that will produce you some phytogrow. But the regular phytogrow doesn't work terribly well. So let's take a look at Photogenic Insulator. Here's some of the examples of different things you can run through the machine. And if you're using just regular phytogrow, then get two, you get one, but if we say, give me the recipe for just say wheat, here we get 1. If we upgrade to rich phytogrow, we get 3. And if we upgrade to fluxed phytogrow, we get 5. Plus, we always get the seed back again, which is, okay, so for wheat, you always get the seed back again. For other ones, you don't necessarily even get your seed back again, unless you're using the more powerful fertilizer. So anyway, you can see here, this takes whatever seed you want to grow, and there's a ton of different ones that you can use, including lily pads and beetroots and pretty much anything that will be farmable on its own, plus some extra stuff that normally is not farmable. Yeah, flipping through here, cocoa is in there, carrots are in there, potatoes are in there. Vines are in there. So vines are not necessarily farmable, but they do grow automatically, and so you can boost their growth through this machine. Lily pads are not growable at all, so if you want to multiply your lily pads, this is kind of your only choice. Yeah, so I've got all these things set up. I could show you how they work. Let's go ahead and just do, I don't know, a couple examples of each here. And we'll say we'll grab some lily pads because they're kind of fun, and some cactus, and some vines. So if I take my vines and toss them in there with regular phytogrow, oops, I got my fertilizer in the wrong spot. Oh, forgot the water. That is another piece of this. You need to have water in the tank. Let's do that. There we go. And now we've doubled our vines. But if I unlock the slot and I put in fluxed phytogrow, and I drop one of those vines in there, did I forget the speed augments on this? Yes, I did. Okay, so you can see why I was putting speed augments in all the other machines. Most of these machines do take a little while to process, which of course is, I imagine, mostly there to encourage you to go ahead and make those speed augments. And now we got 10 of them. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how to make this later. But for this, the recipe is you can either start out with rich slag instead of regular slag. Remember, these are both the same recipes, just with rich instead of regular slag. Or you can take plain old phytogrow and add some bone meal to it. Or you can take sap and you can combine it with phytogrow and get rich phytogrow out of it. And that requires a machine we'll talk about in a little bit called a fluid transposer. Okay, so that gives you your photogenic insulator. Now the other thing to talk about is all of these different specializations. Now each of these allows you to grow different kinds of plants. The ender substrate, not surprisingly, allows you to grow ender plants. The nether substrate allows you to grow nether plants, netherwort and so on. The mycelium substrate for mushrooms, and the sapling substrate for trees and saplings and things. So if you want to grow these kind of plants rapidly, then you can do that. The tree one, basically what you get out of it is you put in saplings and you get wood back again without the process of growing and harvesting the tree. So if you want a wood farm for whatever purpose, maybe you're trying to collect resin, maybe you're trying to make some charcoal, maybe you just need lots of sawdust, whatever, you can go ahead and make yourself some phytogrow and then use this guy to automatically grow your trees. But that's it. That's the Photogenic Insulator. Next we have the Compactor. This is a relatively new machine also, and what it does is it allows you to stamp various items and smash them into a more condensed form. So let's take a few examples here. Mostly this works with metals, although anything that can be has a recipe where you take a 2x2 of the same item or a 3x3 of the same item will pretty much work in here. So nuggets or ingots will get compressed into their more condensed forms. You can even take wood and it will compress it into crafting tables. It'll take 4 of them, make crafting tables out of them. It has a setting here which at the moment is in the press mode, and this is used for making metal plates. So you put in 1 ingot and you get yourself a metal plate of the same kind. The use of which, well, iron plates apparently don't have a use in this mod pack, but maybe they will someday. But various other plates do have a use in various crafting recipes, especially for making these augments. So the recipe for this one happens not to use them. Every time I try to do things. There we go. Yeah, so electrum plates, for example, are required to make this numismatic press, which we'll talk about in just a second. The next mode is storage. So if I take 9 of these and toss them in there, it's going to zip it into a block of iron. And that would be true for 9 nuggets or whatever, right? Anything you can craft into a more condensed form like that. The last use requires this augment, this numismatic press augment, which, as you can see from this recipe, requires you to have already used the compactor to make an electrum plate, plus a bunch of other stuff that's also not super easy to come by. But what it will do for you is turn ingots, or nuggets, or blocks into coins. Now, these coins are good for nothing, except to be burned up in a numismatic dynamo. But obviously the intention of calling them coins and making them coins is for players to trade them amongst themselves in whatever kind of barter economy or money economy that you might want to establish on your server. So we'll see where this goes. I'm kind of curious. I'd love to see future developments that maybe machines that are coin operated, for example, coming out of this. So at the moment, they don't do much of anything, but could be very interesting. But that's it for the mint, and so background that. So that's all your various modes. That is it, though, for the compactor. Next up, I have these 2 machines in the same segment because they're so often used together that I figured it might as well cover them all at once. This bottom guy is the Magma Crucible. It melts things. Put your thing to be melted, add some power, you get liquid, whatever the thing was. So over here I've got some examples of various things that might need filling, but you can imagine pretty much anything that can be liquefied is going to get tossed in here. Up here is the fluid transposer. This is for moving fluids in and out of containers or enriching substances with fluids. And that's a bit more complicated. So let's take a look down here. First, moving things in and out of containers, easy enough. I'm going to put this in empty mode, which is going to take whatever item I put in here and take the fluid out, move the item down to here, and give me the empty container back again. So while it's working, the item sits here, and then once it's done, it gets tossed down here. I can, of course, change it back into fill mode and drop my bucket back in, fill the bucket back up. So whatever container you've got, you can take the liquids in and out. Very handy if you've got a system whereby you want to move things around as buckets or bottles or tanks full of whatever, and then enter them into some kind of pipe-based system, because of course this thing can be configured to output its fluids into all the fluid pipes. So it's a very good way to transition from one, an item-based system into a liquid pipe-based system. Next, let's talk about all of these different things. We'll do something really simple first. So here, I'm going to melt down some redstone. And it's immediately, since I have this configured, going to send its output up to the top into the fluid transposer. There we go, destabilized redstone, just a teeny little sliver of it. And what's going on here? Oh, I want the auto output enabled. Yeah, now it's empty, and now we've got it up here. Okay. Fluid transposer now has destabilized redstone. I'm going to take some glowstone dust and toss it right there. And it's going to enrich the glowstone with the destabilized redstone, the liquid redstone, and make blaze powder. No more having to hunt blazes just to find some blaze powder. Next, let's talk about snowballs and redstone. I'm going to melt my redstone, going to enrich this snowball, and I wind up with blaze powder. If I take some sand and some redstone, and I melt the redstone and add it to the sand, blitz powder. You are, by now, no doubt, sensing a pattern here. Basically, all of the different kinds of powders that you might be able to get by going after these blaze-like creatures can be obtained by enriching the appropriate substance with some destabilized redstone. Next, let's talk about resonant flux ducts. So we talked before about the leadstone flux ducts, about conducting power. Well, some kinds of them require a more complicated stage where you make the item. So here we're going to start with some signalum flux duct, which is itself made by taking this, which is made with hardened glass and electrum, and then you add some stuff to it, you add some more stuff to it, and then finally, in order to get the last step, you actually have to put some destabilized redstone into the container. And now you have a resonant flux duct, which actually is useful for moving power around. And as you can see, these things move a lot of power. So the extra processing and kind of complexity of the construction is well worth it. But that's how you would fill this up with its destabilized redstone to make its core. Before we were talking about taking our plain phytogrow and adding sap to making it rich phytogrow. See, that didn't work because it's still in the fill mode. But I put it into empty mode, so I've got an empty bucket and a little bit of sap. And now I'm going to take my phytogrow, putting this back in the fill mode. And now I've got rich phytogrow. And next up, we'll take some glowstone and an item duct. We'll toss the glowstone in here to produce, very slowly, energized glowstone. And now I'm going to take my item ducts, which are made just with some tin and some hardened glass, any kind of hardened glass, and I'm going to fill them up with energized glowstone. And this makes an impulse item duct, which is basically an item duct that's just a lot faster. And I'll go through a whole example of all the ducts and systems whatnot later, but showing off how this machine works, you can see, oh yeah, that's how you get the final product here. And then finally, we take some of this erythrium dust and a viaduct, which is bronze and hardened glass of some kind or another. And you toss those in there, and whoops, we need to melt that first. And now we've got a viaduct. Viaducts are used for moving players around, and I'll have a whole section talking about how those work in a little bit too. And that's it. That gives you all of the different things that you can do. And of course, there's more recipes for different things, but that's the general idea. You're going to use your Magma Crucible for melting stuff. Oftentimes you have them, just like I do, positioned one right next to the other, so you can just configure them to send the fluids directly into the other. And then use a fluid transposer to put that fluid or mix that fluid or fill up the container or whichever it is that you want to do. The fluid transposer is actually pretty useful on its own too for transitioning between an item-based and a fluid-based network, but the Magma Crucible basically needs a fluid transposer right next to it. Next is the fractioning still. And this is also a brand new machine in one of the more recent versions of thermal expansion. And what it does is it converts fluids from one form into a more useful or more energy-dense form. So let's take a look at some of our options here. So here I've got a crude oil bucket, and I can take this thing. I think I can just right-click to drop it in there, and it's going to convert it into naptha. Now, naphtha is also, just like crude oil, something that you can burn in a compression engine. And I'll have a whole section about compression engines a little bit later. But naphtha produces more power. So, for example, let's take a look at compression engines. Uses of crude oil is going to produce 400,000 RF per bucket, and naphtha is going to produce a lot more, over 1 million RF per bucket, just for the cost of running it through this fractioning still, right? And if I take my naphtha and I run it through my fractioning still again, I'm going to produce refined fuel, which produces 2 million RF per bucket. So I can go from just under 500,000 RF to 2 million RF just by running it twice through a compression dynamo, or sorry, through a fractioning still. So well worth the trouble of doing that. I also produce tar, which is basically a byproduct that works exactly like slime balls. So if you happen not to live near a marsh biome, this is a good substitute. But you can also burn them, works half as well as coal. You can melt them and get some extra creosote if you need it. And you can, obviously, since you can burn them in a furnace, you can also burn them in a steam dynamo with half the regular effect of coal. So let's get rid of all of this stuff here, which I've got set up with a nullifier underneath there. And let's talk about liquefacted coal. So liquefacted coal is what you get when you take pulverized coal and melt it in a magma crucible. And that then can be used to run through the fractioning still and also get naphtha. So if you're not finding any of those new oil sands or oil shale, which, when I looked around, I didn't find them very easily. You can basically take your coal and do the same thing. And coal, obviously, is a whole lot easier to find. It just comes at the penalty that you actually have to melt the stuff down, or you have to pulverize it into pulverized coal first. But it'll give you the same effect of producing naphtha, so you can get fuel from that direction as well. And let's empty this out. Finally, I've got some resin here, and if I toss my resin at it, it's going to produce tree oil. And as you might recall, tree oil is yet another one of the products we can burn in a combustion engine here. Naphtha tree oil, here we go. And that's going to produce 1 million RF per tick, or 1 million RF per bucket. So not quite as good as naphtha, certainly better than liquefacted coal, which you can use directly, or crude oil, which you can use directly, but not quite so nice as refined fuel. But it has the benefit that you can actually set things up to automatically produce, or produce indefinitely without extra materials being added, the tree oil. So this can be a renewable source of energy, and as far as that goes, it's actually not so bad. Not nearly so productive as refined fuel, but for refined fuel, you have to go out into the world and find either oil sands or coal, and then run them through a process for producing the fuel. Whereas with tree oil, you can set yourself up to have something just passively harvest the tree oil. And actually, I'll be talking about it in just a few minutes, so hang on, we'll talk about that. Next up, I've got this machine over here, which you notice has been converting naphtha into the refined fuel and giving me the byproduct of sulfur. And this is the second way of getting sulfur, and it's pretty reliable, but you have to feed this process in the first place. So as you're doing that, you can get sulfur to move things forward. But this might be a pretty common setup, right? If what you want is to get the most out of your coal as far as energy is concerned, you're not going to burn the coal because that's going to produce 16,000 RF. You're going to pulverize it, throw it through one of these guys in order to, or you're going to pulverize it and then throw it through a magma crucible and then throw it into this fractioning still and then put it through another fractioning still, and you're going to wind up with refined fuel, which gives you 2 million RF. Much, much better return on your investment. And I think that's going to be about it for this video. So this time we've talked about the Phytogenic Insulator for accelerating your crop growth, the Compactor for making plates and coins, the Magma Crucible and Fluid Transposer for melting items and filling containers and coating items and transforming things, and do a lot with that. And then finally, the new fractioning still to be able to take fluids and upgrade them to more useful forms. So next time we'll jump back in with some more machines. If you like this video, hit like. If you want to know when that next video is going to be ready, hit subscribe, and I will talk to you later.